Hey guys, so we're back. We're taking a break from the pruning today. It's bitterly cold. We've had loads of storms going overhead, so a little bit hard to get out in the vineyard today. If you've been following along, you'll know that in 2025 we made 2 wines. They're now pretty much complete. They're just going through their maturation, and we're hoping that they'll be ready later this year. But what I thought I'd do is that I don't think I've talked to you about them very much yet. So I thought we'd spend some time in the winery today, and we could talk about the differences in the wines that we've made. And also, I thought it'd be good to talk about why we made the decisions that we did. This is an essential piece of kit for any winemaker. That's a glass pipette. You don't really see these up close unless you're in a winery, but it's a super cool little tool. You just dip it in the wine, in the tank, you put your thumb on the end, pull it out, and then that way you can take samples. So if you remember, we have Lealad and La Morel. Lealad, we only have about 250 bottles this year, so it's not very much. And then La Morel, we've got a bit more, which is about 600-700. So down here, this is our tank with Lealad. So everything's in here. It's full up to about there. La Morel is a little bit more complicated though. We've got some of it in this tank here. We've got some of it in that amphora over there. And we've got some of it in these 2 glass jars. I mentioned a little bit about that last time, but this is a choice. We'll explain what impact it has later. Let's take some samples and see what they're like. You hear that? That's the pressure going down in the hat. So basically the floating hat, you pump it up so that it basically inflates and becomes totally airtight. And that's the pressure coming out of it. We need to deflate it, obviously, to get the wine out. So first one, with our trusty pipette. Now we've done Lealad, this is for La Morel. We've got options where to take it from, but I thought I would show you, or take the opportunity to show you, our trusty clay amphora. Just straight in the top here. Got it everywhere, didn't I? What an idiot. We'll come back and clean that up in a sec. There we go. Right, here we are. Let's take a look. That's La Morel right there, and Lealad put down here. Let's have a look then. This here is La Morel. So one of the things I find interesting about this is it's got quite an intense red, super deep. You can see the color goes all the way to the rim. There's a slight sort of pinkishness to it, but it stays really quite red. So that there is La Morel. Then this is Lealad. This is slightly different. So here we have much more of a bright purple color. It's less on that sort of red and much more on that sort of electric pinky purpley tones that you only get at the rim. So you can see it's also a little bit more transparent. There's not as much of that depth of color and intensity. It's much more bright and cherry type of color. Really purple Lealad. Much more on the purple side of things. Okay, so we've done our color check. We've got La Morel in this hand and Lealad in this hand. Let's see what they smell like. Okay, so La Morel, it smells really, really exciting. Honestly, I absolutely love it. It's got these dark fruits, so like a dark black cherry, a little bit of plum. There's some licorice spice there. It's so rich and enticing. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very powerful as well on the nose. On this side, we have Lealad. Wow, yeah, okay, so completely different. So here it's much more towards like red fruits, so red cherries, some raspberries. There's this amazing spice that runs through this one, like a kind of slight pepperiness, a sort of licorice, which is really present there. This is much lighter, much more kind of on the leaner side. It's beautiful, enticing nose. So let's give them a try now. Right, so I'll go and try Lealad straight away, and then I'll tell you what I think. Okay, so they're both lovely wines. I'm really happy with how they've turned out, but they're very different. So La Morel, so here is a wine. It's got this very silky texture. It's like velvet or velour in the mouth. You get that lovely sort of nice rich fruit just enveloped by this silky texture. It's long, it keeps going and going and going. It's really lovely. Then Lealad is very different. It's much tighter. The acidity here is amazing. It's just kind of slicing through your mouth, and these kind of little cherry fruits and small red fruits dancing around. There's kind of less material in this. It's hard to describe. It's because of the tannins. The tannins are a bit lower. They're still there, they're present. You feel them on your gums, but it has less of that kind of sort of plush, velvety texture. It's much kind of fresher, leaner. So they're two entirely different products. I mean, you know, for two red wines grown right next to each other, what we have here is one, you know, much lighter, much fresher, might drink it with some charcuterie, you know, some much lighter dishes. Then we have another, which I really go well more with meats, roasts, much more of a richer foods. So yeah, two completely, you know, different things there. Traditionally in Bordeaux, what you would do is you would blend these two together. And it would make a lovely wine, and you'd have this, you know, much kind of bigger aromatic profile and so on. We decided to keep them separate this year. We think they're so different, they've got so much interest on their own accord. We're going to keep them separate and sell them as two different products. That's not that traditional for Bordeaux. Like I said, most of the time people blend wines. That's the tradition here, it's what it's known for. In Burgundy and in other regions of France, you tend to have more of this single vineyard approach where you bottle your vineyards differently. So we've chosen to go down a little bit of a different route, and that's really driven by the product. It's not that alien to Bordeaux though either. I think there's a bit of a misconception that soil types and vineyards and what we call like terroir in winemaking has a little bit less of a focus historically in Bordeaux, but it's not entirely true. I mean, you look at some of the greatest chateaux of the region, they're named after the places where the vines are. It's very simple as that. You look at somewhere like Morel in Saint-Estèphe, which is a fabulous wine. It's named after the Pink Hill. And that's where their best vineyards are. They're planted on a gravel outcrop that used to have a pink heather on it. You have other places like Haut-Brion, the famous Haut-Brion from Bordeaux. Haut-Brion is the name of the hill where Haut-Brion is made. So, you know, historically, Bordeaux has always had this connection to specific soils, to specific places where grapes are grown, and that's something which, you know, really interests us. You know, it's not the same as Burgundy, where you have the classification of the different soils and things like that, but it's still there, it's still present, and it's really that kind of old spirit that we want to bring to our winemaking. We want to put at the forefront the amazing soils, the amazing vineyards that there are in Bordeaux, and to really kind of create that connection. And, you know, for us, that means if we've got two vineyards that are right next to each other that make two entirely different products, well, we want to really put that to the fore. We don't want to blend it. We don't want to, you know, even if it makes a slightly better wine, we want to just make sure that that is really coming forwards in the products that we make. Let's go and dive into the reasons why they're different. To do that, we need to go to the vineyard. So first things first, I think we're going to finish these off and then head there straight away. So as if by magic, here we are on the vines. So what have we learned? Two different wines from two different vineyards. The two vineyards are right next to each other. We're up here on Lealad and down there we're on Morel, but they taste very different and they have different characteristics. So the reason for that is mainly in the vineyards, and we're going to go through some of those factors now. So we'll start up here on Lealad, we'll go down on Morel after, and yeah, let's go and take a look. Here's the first factor. The first factor we're going to speak about is soil. Soil is something that there's a massive area of passion for wine lovers all around the world. It's something which is of particular interest to fans of Burgundy, but as I was saying before, it's not something that's alien to Bordeaux either. So up here on Lealad, the first thing to realise, and you can see it here where we've had the digger on an old vine, is that we have this very fine, silty, sandy soil. So it's a kind of mix of what we call aeolian silt, so wind-blown silt, mixed with sand, mixed with gravel, mixed with a little bit of clay as well, and it has this very fine texture, and it has a huge impact on the wine. Actually, it really marks the wine with a kind of inherent fruitiness. It's very fruit forward, very floral, very drinkable. And because it's very fine, it hasn't got like loads of clay in, it means that it doesn't have a huge amount of structure to the wine. And so when we were saying earlier about Lealad not necessarily being as tannic or not being as kind of full-bodied, rich and opulent as Morel, that's part of the reason why, is because of these soils which are very fine and light. One of the markers of silty soils is that they leave this powdery texture, like almost like very fine flour. on your fingers. So if you can see that just by rubbing it, it's very, very fine and it leaves this sort of very fine residue. Clay is much more sticky. So clay is basically like wet pottery, you know, before it's been fired. But silt, yeah, it has that kind of very fine sort of powderiness to it, and it leaves a residue like that on your fingers. So that's what I'm talking about when I say fine soils as opposed to heavy soils. So we're stood in the middle of Lealad here, probably the highest point, even though it's pretty flat. The next thing I wanted to point out to you is the exposure to the sun. So these vines get the sun all day long. They run basically east to west, and they're in a very clear open plain. The sun rises behind you over there, and it goes all the way over the sky here, unimpeded, and sets at the end of the row there. It means that every possible bit of sunlight throughout the day hits these vines. That has the effect on ripening the grapes really well. That's why you get such a beautiful fruit profile, nice ripe fruit profile from these vines as well. Because they just get so much sun exposure. They're just bathed in sunlight all day long. So one thing I should have mentioned is why sunlight leads to this very intense fruit profile is that very simply vines need sunlight to photosynthesize, and more sunlight means they can ripen more and they can ripen the grapes more effectively. So you get riper, fruitier grapes when you have more sun. It's as simple as that. Okay, so the final thing to point out is vine age. I keep telling you that vines are like people, and I think this is a good example of it. So up here on Lealad, if you've been following along, you'll know that these are what we call young vines. They're about 10 years old. So they're implanted, they're embedded, but they're still considered young. And this is a perfect example of why vines are like people. This is a lovely, as you can see from the trunk here, young vine, about 10 years. You can see it's developed, but not too much. There isn't too much wood. However, like young people, like teenagers, it's got absolutely loads of energy, but it's not always directed in the most effective way. So as you can see, there's just this massive mishmash of growth from last year where the vine has just got so much energy, it's just exploded with shoots and growth, but maybe a bit too much and a little bit all over the place. And the impact that this has on the wine is effectively, it creates lovely, light, fragrant wines, but they don't necessarily have like the depth, the complexity of something you would get with an old vine where there's less growth, but it's a little bit more focused on ripening the fruit effectively. So a little bit like teenagers and adults, loads of energy, maybe sometimes a little bit misdirected. That's how the vine age impacts Lealad as well. So we're in Les Morel. We've just walked down from Lealad, walked down the first row that we got to, and what do I stumble across here? That is white gold right there. No, I'm only joking. It's Asteria limestone. So what we have in this vineyard that's different to Lealad, which is at the top of the slope, as the soils get thinner and they're going down the slope, you get closer to the rock underneath, which is a mix of clay and limestone. This particularly famous limestone from the right bank of Bordeaux, Asteria limestone, it's present here. There's a vein that runs underneath the vineyard, and you have much less influence here of the silts. So there's still some silt mixed in. You know, it's not like binary, silt up the top, not silt on Les Morel, but other things come to influence. So we have more clay here, that's for sure. The soil's heavier, and also we have our Asteria limestone. And what difference that makes? Well, it makes wines that are a little bit more typical of the right bank of Bordeaux. So with a bit more body, a bit more depth, a bit more power, a bit more black fruited, more like a kind of classic Saint-Emilion aroma profile. And also because of the clay content and also the limestone, it changes the structure of the wine. The limestone is alkaline, it means the acidity goes up, and then the clay in the soil holds onto water even more than silt does, and it means the soils are cooler, and it means the grapes have thicker skins, and so you get wines that are much richer in the mouth. They have more material because of those thicker skins. And so that's where we get those differences, where the Lealad is a bit more finer and lighter bodied because of those very fine silts, and here it's a bit more structured and fuller bodied. So next factor that we talked about at the top is that Lealad gets the sun all day. It's flat, it gets hit by the sun from morning all the way through till evening. It's basically the same down here with one small variation. As I told you, this is on the north facing slope of the hill where Lealad is. Lealad is just behind that tree line there. It's literally just there. North-facing slope has one really interesting difference, is that it means that the sunlight that hits this vineyard is more diffuse than it is up there. As I was saying, the sunlight impacts the ripening because more sunlight, more ripening, riper fruit, blah, blah, blah. Well, by having more diffuse sunlight here, it means there's a very particular benefit for hot years, which we're getting more and more in Bordeaux, is that we don't get fruit that is overripe. So the grapes down here stay very balanced. The acidity stays really nice and fresh and zippy, and we never get into those kind of jammy fruit profiles down here. It remains on the fresh fruit side of things. And that's because generally, because it's on a northern slope, it's a little bit cooler, the sunlight is a tiny bit less intense, and so the ripening is just measured here. Okay, final factor, vine age on La Morel. Here is a good example. So as you can see, it's a much stronger, bigger trunk. We don't need to support it with a stake anymore, and that's because it's a much older vine, this one. This is one of our older vines in the highest part of Le Morel. They were planted in the 90s, in the mid to early 90s, so they're over 30 years old now. But the main thing to say is, again, like people, these are behaving, you know, like mature adults. So as compared to Lealad, you can see there's been less growth over the course of the year, but it's been a lot more focused. All of the growth is where we wanted it to be, right on the pruning spurs, and it's really focused its efforts on a couple of beautiful pieces of wood. So it hasn't spread its energy, it's really focused its effort. And by having fewer shoots, because of this kind of experience of the vine at this age, it means that we get better quality fruit. It's not just trying to create loads and loads and loads of grapes, it's focusing its efforts on just a few of them, and you get these beautiful bunches at the end of the year, ripe, aromatic, absolutely gorgeous. And so that's why it's so important to keep old vines, and why we love Le Morel so much. One of the final effects of old vines that it's really important to understand is that because it doesn't have as much energy, or it wants to spend its energy on fewer bunches of grapes, actually what you get is you get smaller berries with thicker skins, and that again, it impacts the wine. So not just is it the soil, but the older vines are creating these smaller, more compact berries, ultimately leading to that sensation in the mouth of having a kind of velvety coating wine, which is really what Le Morel is all about. So Lealad are wonderful young vines over there, and La Morel are lovely older vines just on the north facing slope there. So let's recap. Why is it that these two wines taste so different? Well, it's not the winemaking, because we do everything the same across both of our bottlings. More or less what it comes down to is a couple of things. First one is soil, two different soil types, two different exposures as well, one north facing, one pretty much south facing. And then finally as well, the age of the vines. Old vines and young vines, they're like people, they're not all the same, and the product is different at the end. If you're interested in this and you're interested in what we've been talking about, well, we are going to be getting these wines out onto the market for sale later this year. We're really, really excited to share all of these with you and for you to taste them. Make sure you follow our Instagram, make sure you follow our TikTok and our YouTube, subscribe, like, leave comments. We're going to be giving updates then on when the wines are released, when they go live on our website, when our website goes live, pre-registration, prices, markets, distributors, things like that. It's all going to be coming in the next few months. So make sure you get tuned in, make sure you follow, and then you'll have the opportunity to taste these. I can't stress it enough, we don't have much this year. We've got 1,000 bottles. That's what restoring an abandoned vineyard means in practice. So we're expecting them to go. So please do make sure you get in there early and get a chance to try them and tell us what you think. Okay, so next time you see us, we've taken a break from the pruning. So we've got all of this to do. The whole of Lealad, we've got the whole of La Morel. Like I said, it's probably going to take us a month. We're going to be working really hard on that, and we're going to check back in with you probably in the early springtime when we start getting those first growths on the vine and we start seeing what 2026 is going to give us. So yeah, lots of hard work for us to do, but we'll give you some updates very shortly.